It's not yet been catalogued, but it's lovely because it has its original inside sleeve. Tashkentsky Zavod, Tashkent factory. So it's a Soviet era 78 of Uzbek folk music called Senga by Shabarov. The music's by Shabarov, the words are by Navoinki, it says. The singer is T. Sharipov. So this is another great example, probably somewhere between the 1930s and 1950s, I'm guessing, although I haven't yet dated the label and the catalogue number. That usually gives you some clue as to when it's from. I'm Will Prentice. I'm the Head of Technical Services at the British Library in the Sound and Vision Department. We're largely concerned with digitisation and audio preservation, audiovisual materials here. So a typical day involves ensuring that everything is being done okay. We've got a fairly large throughput of material here. We have people working on large quantities of everything from wax cylinders to open reel tapes, LPs, CDs, everything. So I'm going to digitize the Uzbek gramophone disc we mentioned earlier. The important thing is that I recreate the recording. I replay it according to the parameters that it was made under. So, for example, if we had reason to think it had been recorded at 75 RPM, then we would try and recreate that here. Given the time period, the chances are it probably is 78 exactly, and that's what I'm going to start with at least. We have a stylus here which is of a particular size and shape. In this case it's 2.8 thousandths of an inch radius with an elliptical shaft and a truncated tip. That's useful for playing the groove walls without touching the bottom of the groove usually, which has more damage in it.
My name is Andy Linehan. I'm the curator of popular music at the British Library Sound and Vision. Generally, my day-to-day work involves three aspects, I suppose. The acquisition, the collection of recordings, the access to those recordings, and the research that goes on around them. So most of the work, a lot of it, is about acquiring records for the collection. And the collection, the bulk of the collection is commercially issued discs, the sort of thing that you get from record companies, established record companies, and in the olden days was bought in shops. At the moment we're focusing on independent labels who are putting out material that might slip under our radar, and it's particularly difficult for us, being kind of London based and having limited resources, to know about labels that are appearing and doing limited editions of CDs, vinyl or even cassettes, and of course digital material. And so that's something that we're concentrating on particularly this year. This is the non-commercial material. This is the stuff that's been generated either by ourselves or by people who've donated the material, people who've done field recordings, people who've done interviews, people who've been out recording sessions and live performances. So we have all sorts of content, all sorts of media down here. Collections like given individual numbers like this. This is a collection that we've recorded at WOMAD festivals for the last 20 or 30 years. Right. And you can see here the variety of formats that we've used to record at the festival over the years. When we first went to the festival, we'd be taking 1/4-inch tape and boxes and boxes and boxes of it like that to record the bands on. Even though we recorded at half speed, we'd still need loads and loads of tapes. We then progressed onto various formats such as Betamax and VHS. We then recorded on DAT tapes, and we now go to the festival and we record on flashcards. We have no physical items. We record on the flashcards, back them up, and then we record back on those flashcards the next day. The rest of this is all sorts of collections from all sorts of collection areas. So we have oral history collections. Big project we did in the Millennium, which was the Millennium Memory Bank in conjunction with BBC Local Radio. So there are thousands of interviews of people talking about their everyday lives in the 20th century. We have another collection here from Capital Radio. When Capital Radio moved about 10 or 12 years ago, they found they had thousands of tapes that they weren't going to use again. Many of them were really interesting material, like interviews with people, broadcasts, live performances. And again, we brought them in and we keep them here. Some of them have been digitised. People can come in here and listen to them.
My name's Cheryl Tipp. I'm the Curator of Natural Sounds here at the British Library. I look after all of the wildlife, environmental sounds, mechanical sounds. On this side, these are reels of bird recordings. So this entire section is birds. So you go all the way down. It's all organised by Latin name. Some species, such as this one here, we have more recordings of it. So when we originally archived, we'd have reel 1, reel 2, reel 3. Some of them you have 14, 15 reels. Other ones, say for example this, there's just one reel. And it's archived on 1/4-inch tape. Eventually these will all be digitised. And you have different cuts made by different recordists. And that's the best way to archive it at the time. Some of you only have one recording. So those are the rarer birds, but again it just goes on and on and on. So all of that, it's about 5,000, 6,000 reels probably. And that's just of birds, and then you go around the other side and there's more birds and mammals and insects and amphibians and fish. Yeah. And habitat recordings.
Birds seem to be by far the most popular thing.
Yeah, there's been a lot of research done into bird song, bird calls, evolution, and they are the most vocal group and the easiest to find as well. We have, so in addition to the species recordings, we have the habitat recordings as well. So we might have a rainforest in Australia, we might have wind blowing across the Antarctic. We have recordings of weather, so it's amazing how popular recordings like that are. You know, the sounds of the sea, the sounds of a thunderstorm, the sounds of rain, and they're just as important to us, you know, because it's the sounds of our planet, whether it's a species or whether it's, you know, the sounds of the sea or of our harbour or whatever. They're still sounds of our planet. Probably now more than ever, it's really, really important to be out there and to be recording the sounds, because so many species and so many habitats are disappearing really quickly. And in the archive we have recordings of extinct species, you know, and you think that is the only way now that you can ever hear this sound again. It's gone from the wild completely, it's not in captivity.
So as you can see, it's huge, absolutely huge. I think there's something in the region of 125,000 vinyl LPs here, which is just less than half of our collection. And they cover, again, all sorts of content. Nowadays, when we get vinyl in, which we still do, we file it just as it comes in. But in the old days, we used to file under record label, prefix and number, which means there's a lot of shelving here which has runs of the same record label. Like here, for example, there's there's a huge run of Decca records dating back, you know, it's kind of 1960s type material. So there's things like, here we are, Aftermath of the Rolling Stones, famously John Mayall, Eric Clapton, Blues Breakers on Decca, and Decca, you know, is a big British label, and so there's all sorts of people on it, like Billy Fury. And then you get things like the Tony Kinsey Quintet, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, next to Max Bygrave's Biggest Hits, and there's some, you know, interesting titles, as you can see there. But there's some, you know, it gives you a really good idea of what was going on at a British record label at the time.
My involvement with sound began when I was 6 years old. I started learning to play the bagpipes, which I played for many years. And if you've ever been in a room with bagpipes being played nearby you, it's a really visceral experience. So you get a lot of experience of the physics of sound, really, tuning of the drones, the kind of unison beating effects. I grew up on a farm, and the farm steward, who actually was the guy who taught me bagpipes, as it happens, taught me very early on that when at the harvest time, when you have all the equipment going in the barn at the same time, you have 6 or 7 different pieces of heavy machinery going on 2 different floors. The way you ensure that everything is going is through your ears. You're always able to hear all the component parts of this huge throbbing, hissing, thrashing noise. And if any aspect of that sound disappears, you have to turn everything off really quickly, otherwise you destroy everything. So one of the major challenges we have as audiovisual archivists is that we're not just archiving sound carriers, tapes and discs and stuff, we're also archiving systems to play them. So you have to have all the replay equipment and enough spare parts and enough expertise and so on to ensure that the whole replay system survives. Hence, in this corridor here, it's littered with bits of equipment. We have a selection of DAT players and some CD players and cassette players and so on. Basically, we try to collect as much of this stuff as possible. None of it's being made anymore.
What are you buying now that you would be kind of keeping?
Professional anything, really.
Right.
Professional DAT players are very important. Video players, VHS and Betamax, very useful, because they were used as the earliest affordable digital sound recording devices. Turntables and everything, really.
But we take recordings of all animal groups, and it's not just the sounds that we can hear naturally. It's infrasonic recordings, ultrasonic recordings. We also take in like the more mechanical sounds, so recordings that people can make with contact mics. So you might hear, I don't know, beetles in a log eating away at the wood, and you pick that up through a contact mic. So there's all different ways of representing species sounds.
Audio engineers are trained typically to make things sound good, but good is subjective. You know, today's good is not the same as good 20 years ago or in 20 years' time. So when people reissue recordings from old 78s, for example, we tend to remove the clicks and the crackles and the hiss because modern day audiences are assumed not to like that or to find it distracting. In an archive, when we digitize that kind of material, we always retain all the artifacts from the original recording, all the clicks and crackles, because that is one of the filters, if you like, one of the lenses that we see the past through. It's a significant part of that recording. Our relationship with sound and moving image have always evolved. We've always had a changing sense of what it's about and how we can use it. I mean, it's becoming highly democratized now. Everyone can record everything on their phone, for example. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. 100 years ago, hardly anybody could make any recordings, but some people could. The 20th century was heavily about audiovisual material. Our memory of the 20th century is heavily audiovisual. But our sense of the 21st century is going to be a different kind of audiovisual. I mean, it's going to include other things too, of course, the web and so on. But if in a situation where everything can be recorded easily, archiving is not going to be so much about what can we bring in. It's going to be about what to exclude. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a white noise of information, which is completely incomprehensible. The world increases its amount of electronic data by something like 60% every year, which is crazy and completely unsustainable.
Just in the period I've been working here, there's been rap, house music, dubstep. There's been all sorts of different types of music and music evolving, and also all types of different formats, types of different ways of consuming music, and seeing music breaking through into kind of different areas where nowadays you don't see football programs on TV without some sort of backing track of music. 25 years ago, you didn't see that. How did that happen? How does it evolve? That sort of thing. That's what really keeps me at it. It's continually evolving, both in terms of what you're listening to and how you're listening to it. And that is still a source of great fascination.
Well, here's a lovely wax cylinder. It was produced by Peter Wiper, who's a melodeon player from Hamilton in Scotland. He had his own music shop and he decided to issue his own recordings. He was a prize-winning musician. So he started the Empress label. It says here, Wipers Empress Records. Non-genuine, without the picture of the accordion on it. So this is probably, to my knowledge, the first example of a DIY artist-run record label in the UK. On the lid you can see maybe. Wipers Empress Records. And handwriting has the title of the piece there, Flowers of Edinburgh. So we have 3 recordings on the Wiper label. He later on went on to record for Edison and Columbia and I think maybe Rego and some other companies. But this is a great kind of piece of social history really for sound recording.
White World, number 1, played by Phil Whitelaw, and play Billboard.